Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show for the first episode in a brand new series. We've been starting these left, right and centre recently, but we've got a whole new one, the Gooner Talk interview series, in which myself chat to a couple of Arsenal fans or journalists or writers, loads of different characters. And I mean, what a way to kick off this series, chatting to the person basically that got me into listening to podcasts, Andrew Mangan from Arseblog. How you doing, mate?
I'm all right, Tom. How are you?
Yes, I'm all good. I have to say that, first of all, I much appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to come on and have a chat.
All right.
I'm sure that lots of our listeners already listened to your show, and obviously with James too. Just an opening question. We've had a couple of people on in the past and interviews, and I like to kick it off with more of a fun question. We have Rafa Honigstein on recently, and the first question I asked was, and it caught a bit off guard, but how well can you actually kick the ball?
How well can I kick a football?
Yes, Rafa was not modest. It's fair to say.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean I've played football all my life.
When I was doing, I did not. Yeah.
Sorry, we have a bit of a delay thing going on here. For sure. Yeah,
that's fine. It's fine. I did the Wikipedia search just to do a little bit of background stuff, and there's actually a footballer called Andrew Mangan.
Yeah, I think he played for. I can't remember the clubs that he played for, but yeah, he was a forward. I'm more of a central defender. That's my thing. I'm a centre half, and I've always been a defender throughout my career. But I take a good free kick. Or I used to take a good free kick when I was playing 11-a-side. So yeah, I can kick a ball well. I think I'd stand up. I'd stand up to any of your other guests that you've had so far. What did Honigstein?
Well, Honigstein,
or is he?
He said pretty good, similar to you. He said that he can kick a ball pretty well. I mean, that's that German efficiency, I suppose. And I'm sure, as you can take a set piece, I'm sure he can take a darn good penalty if we put him up to one. So yeah. But
yeah, well, there you go. Maybe that's the
probably
next, Sorry, I was going to say that maybe this is the next step for the thing. You can have like a free kick penalty competition between your guests. We can see how that plays out.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to have some issues, I think, with this delay going back and forth, but we're going to muddle through like the podcast experts we supposedly are. I will jump into things. I mean, opening with talking about football itself and talking about penalty taking is probably the only real bit of laughter you can have around Arsenal at the moment. I mean, there's no time to waste. Let's jump straight into things. Obviously, listening to the Arsecast and knowing your feelings on where you stand on the manager, I kind of want to know where your tipping point was from where it looked so good, 22 games unbeaten last season, and gradually towards the end, as we were given this false hope of Champions League qualification, it sort of declined. Where was your tipping point?
I think I was really troubled by the end of last season. I thought the end to the Premier League campaign was really poor. Obviously, we should be playing Champions League football this season. There's no question in my mind. And we ended up with 7 points from our last 21 or 24 or whatever it was. And that terrible run of results. And that dented my confidence in Unai Emery. I think the Europa League final also dented my confidence. Whatever about losing a final, but getting absolutely spanked the way we did against Chelsea was very disheartening. But I have to say, even at the start of this season, I was if not necessarily on board, I was sort of willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. If results had been good and performances had been good, because we had what we thought was a good summer in the transfer market. So I thought, okay, look, you can maybe have some mitigation for the way that last season went because of injuries. It was his first season. It's the first season without Wenger. There were all these various factors that, even though it was really terrible, you could sort of say they had an impact. But for me, it was the game against Watford this season that absolutely cemented my opinion that we're not going where we need to go with Unai Emery. I think we need to go in a different direction. We need to go in a different direction quite fast. And subsequent results have just backed that up. Even today I was writing on the blog about how I was looking for 10 points from 12 in this run of games that we had coming into this international break, which was Sheffield United, Crystal Palace, Wolves and Leicester. I thought 10 points from 12 was doable for Arsenal. We've ended up with 2 points from 12. So, yeah, I think it was the Watford game, though, the way that second half went and how clueless the team looked. That was what did it for me.
I think when I've just had a little bit of, because the chat box is up next to us, and we're talking about a change in manager, and it's interesting because a change in manager has happened just down the road, or is imminent just down the road, because Pochettino's been sacked by Spurs. It's literally just popped on my screen. I'm a little bit shocked by that. What do you feel like if you're in a situation, because we're poles apart, so they get to the Champions League final last season and they're in a position where it would look like they would push on from there. They're now at the point where they're sitting in the bottom half of the table and they've changed manager. When you look at the juxtaposition between that and how we're viewing our own management situation right now, where does that sort of pit the two clubs against each other?
I look at this and it makes me think that we're probably less inclined to make a change now because we don't want to be copying what Tottenham did. I think that the thing for me is that Pochettino at Spurs has had them punching well above their weight for a number of seasons now. They've never had a team which has finished in the top four as consistently as they have under Pochettino. They've never been to a Champions League final. They might have had a bit of luck along the way, but they got to a Champions League final. He established them as a top four side, which of course I don't like and you don't like, and nobody watching this is, likes it because it's Tottenham. And they're sacking him. I know the form hasn't been good, but they're taking what they consider to be decisive action in the best interest of the football club, I guess. And Arsenal, for a number of years now, considering the stature of the club, considering the expectations of the fan base, considering the wage bill, considering the level of investment, have been underperforming. We've underperformed under Unai Emery. There's no doubt about it in my mind. We are underperforming right now under Unai Emery, and we're letting him continue the poor work that he's doing to the point where this season might not be something we can save. Top four, I think, was a realistic target for us, considering the talent in the squad, considering the investment we made in the summer. I think we are well below where we should be. We're continuing our sort of, I don't want to say negative spiral because that's a fairly Tottenham thing to say, but I think our trajectory is it's that, and we're sitting on our hands. And I think in modern football, as if we can look at Tottenham and think it's ridiculous that they're sacking Pochettino because of everything that he's done for the club, why the hell are we hanging on to Unai Emery, who has done nothing comparable for Arsenal, and yet appears to be fairly safe in his job?
Do you then place some blame towards, because in the summer it was all Don Raúl making the most of what we expected to be another generic transfer window at Arsenal? Does the blame fall with not making a decision with the likes of Raúl and Edu and Vinay, or do you place more of that emphasis towards the Cronkies? I mean, Josh has come out, say, be excited, and he's getting more involved with the communication, but has recently been rather quiet again. Where does the buck sort of stop with these people?
Well, look, I think the situation we're in at the moment is that the Cronkies are the owners, and obviously they have to sanction any decisions that are made. People like Raúl and Edu are there to run the football club, though, and they're there to make the decisions, and they're there to sort of say to the Cronkies, look, this is not good enough. We need to do something about it. We need to change the manager or whatever. Give us the go-ahead to do that. At this point, I don't really put any blame on Emery for what he's doing because he is what he is. He's the kind of coach that he is. And I think if you continue to let him do what he's doing, you've got to move away from him. Like when a player plays really badly and people criticize the player, but there comes a point where you go, well, if he's in the team every week, you can't criticize a player playing badly every week if he's still being picked. He's not the one who's picking himself. He's not putting himself out there on the pitch. And I think we're in that sort of situation with Emery right now. I do wonder if there is perhaps, with Raul, a little bit of a pride thing going on, because he was very much in favor of Emery. When we were thinking about bringing in Arteta, he was the guy who really pushed for Emery, because when you think about it, how was Emery going to convince Ivan Gazidis in an interview, with his no English? It had to be done in Spanish and via, somebody translating, who I assume was Raul. So I just wonder if Raul is just a little bit unwilling to pull the trigger, because he was the one who basically, pushed hard for Emery and wants him to succeed, as we all did when he took over. I think we all wanted him to succeed, but it's an issue for higher up the food chain right now, that's for sure.
I want to pick up on one of the points you mentioned about the communication specifically, because we're looking at a manager that's just been relieved of his duties in Pochettino, who, when he arrived in England at Southampton, couldn't speak a word of the language whatsoever. He was doing his interviews with his translators. And whilst Emery came in and tried, we still don't feel like he's got a real grasp on the language enough to sort of communicate maybe what he wants from the team. Is that something that I don't want to bring up another stick to beat the manager with, but is it something that is a real criticism of Emery, to say that whilst you look at Pochettino, learn the language fairly quickly? I know that some people pick up languages better than other people do, but is it a viable criticism to aim at Emery, to say that he hasn't put enough effort in to learn the language to then communicate his ideas across to the team?
I'm not sure that it is quite fair, to be honest, because he is only 18 months in. I do think his English has improved in terms of his vocabulary and certainly his understanding of it. I think where you might criticize him, generally speaking, is just his communication skills. I don't think he's a very skilled communicator. Whether that's in Spanish or whether it's in English, I'm not sure he's got the kind of charisma or character. I think he speaks in kind of buzzwords and phrases, and they're very difficult to parse, and they're difficult to read anything into. Whereas, we've had 22 years of a manager who was really smart and erudite and would say witty things, and whether you like Wenger or you didn't like Wenger, you could not say that he wasn't an intelligent man and a good communicator. I just think that when somebody struggles to get their message across in a media environment, maybe it's because they're not comfortable in front of the media, but maybe they're just not a good communicator on any level. And I wonder if what we're seeing on the pitch is in some way tied into the player's inability to get what he wants, or maybe his inability to impart what exactly it is he wants from them when they go out on the pitch. I go back to the Watford game, and Granit Xhaka, he talked about how the team were scared, right? And he got a lot of criticism for that, Xhaka, and I think it's maybe a little unfair, because I think you have to step back and think about, why is a professional footballer scared? Hang on, these guys are better at football than 99.9% of the people in the world. They have talent, they've got character, they've got mentality, they've got dedication, they've got commitment, motivation, all of these things to get to a club like Arsenal. Whether you think a player is shit or otherwise, he's got to have something about him, right? The only time a footballer is scared on the pitch or fearful is when they don't know what they're supposed to do. And that's what it comes down to for me, and I think it's reflected in results.
I mean, it's so true, because I'm thinking, obviously, coming from a perspective of a teacher, if I go into a lesson and I don't know what I've planned to do, and I've got 30 kids in front of me, and I'm thinking,
you're going to shit yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I have absolutely no idea what you're going to do. So completely. Whilst we bring up Xhaka, obviously Xhaka is a very relevant thing to talk about right now. He's gone away with the Swiss national team. You put a not so cryptic. Footballers like to be cryptic on social media sometimes, but Xhaka's one of the most blunt people around in terms of those postings.
Yeah, he is.
He sort of posted this thing talking about how he's basically trying to ignore the noise around him and stuff like that. How do you, because listening to the Arsecast with James for the last couple of years or so, Xhaka was definitely someone that was always brought up as I don't want to use the word target, but certainly someone that was brought up around where mistakes certainly conglomerated toward Xhaka. Mistakes happened over and over again, and that left him very culpable to criticism. Now, what has happened to him if I give you my view, I was there at the Palace game. I took which was a huge mistake, a Liverpool mate with me, and he was enjoying every second of it. When he was going off the pitch, the reaction from the fans around me was horrific. Now, I know that what Xhaka did wasn't aimed at me because I wasn't one of those people swearing abuse, and I'm not one of those people that's given him abuse online. But at the same time, I also have to think that he's the captain of the club, whether we liked that decision or not. You can't respond in the same way that he did. So with these recent news that he's been linked with a move away in January, can you actually ever see him coming back into the team again?
That is a really good question. I've spoken to a few people about Xhaka and about the situation, and the general feeling is that he is minded to leave Arsenal as soon as he possibly can, and that's the January transfer window. So if you've got a player whose relationship with the fans has broken down to the extent that Xhaka has, I was at the Aston Villa game, the crazy game, and he got some jeers in that game too. And it was not long before he was appointed captain, and I remember writing about it and saying, look, it's a really crazy thing to make a guy captain after he's just been jeered and heckled off the pitch. It wasn't anything like the Palace game.
No.
But it should have been like a warning to Emery, that, look, if I make this guy the captain and then he does one thing or two things or something happens, I'm hanging him out to dry, basically. And I'm not excusing Xhaka in any way, but I do think Emery's decision-making, how long it took him to make him captain, had a real impact on the reaction to that appointment being made. I think it's very difficult for him to play again. If he wants to leave and if his relationship with the fans is broken down and he feels like people are... And how is his motivation going to be when he's on the pitch? I know he's a professional, but I think it's a really difficult to really unpleasant, really unhealthy situation for the football club. And, this is something myself and James have talked about, is like how many individual player situations are we having to deal with under Unai Emery? When you think about Mesut Ozil last season, Mesut Ozil this season, Aaron Ramsey last season, the Granit Xhaka thing, Lauren Koscielny doing what he did during the summer. This was the captain of the football club who went on strike just to get away. And I think there have been a few other little bits and pieces. Torreira is unhappy at the moment because he's being asked to play in a role which doesn't suit him. All of these things, the earth doesn't revolve around the sun, but the planets, or the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. Emery is at the center of this, in my opinion. And I think it's part of the earth doesn't revolve around the sun. What am I talking about? The manager and his lack of man management skills has created these situations which are unhealthy, unpleasant, and don't lead to a happy dressing room.
Yeah, and in the chat box, Ben Parfit said there that I think a lot of it can be pointed at Emery, given that he's putting Xhaka in the role he has been where he's more exposed to errors rather than utilising his strengths. Now, I don't agree entirely with that statement because I think that Xhaka plays as the deeper part of the midfield. But when you brought up Torreira, that's certainly where you can point the finger at Emery in terms of the positioning of his players, and it's coming out with his agent saying that he's not happy. Yeah, well, I understand the theory behind it. I understand that he looked at sort of where you saw Kante under Sarri, played further up the pitch. Jorginho sat at the base. Kante's playing further up to try and win the ball back sooner to get Chelsea on the counter. Yeah, it's like Emery's looked at that and thought Torreira could do that.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that Torreira was ever, and you talked about it on your show, the player that he necessarily wanted to be at the base of the midfield. He wanted a more stocky, like when he was at Sevilla, he got Kukoviak, and then he got Steven Nzonzi, and obviously he brought Kukoviak to PSG with him. So that just shows what he wants in a player. And Torreira wasn't really that sort. He wanted to sort of take Nzonzi back again. I believe he was I think he was still at Roma before he moved. He was at Sevilla before he moved to Roma. But when you look at a player like Torreira, who's clearly unhappy, clearly voicing that, drip feeding the media as we're seeing at the moment himself, like our own club like to do, do you think there'll be, and use the word again, another tipping point where Emery does turn around and go and weigh up the fact that I could either lose a really top-class player and a really good prospect for the future, who's only 23, 24 years old, or do I stick with my principles and continue to play him in the system that I want to play?
It wouldn't surprise me if Emery had no problem with Torreira leaving, because then he could go and get like a big tall guy, which is what he wants in his midfield, and I think, that's another consideration for Arsenal, to be honest, because we're thinking about the future. The reason we bought Torreira at 22 years of age was so he could be part of our midfield for the next 3, 4, 5 seasons. That's why we bought him. We didn't buy him for a season and a half and buy him so we can get to the point where he's so fucked off he wants to go back to Italy. Pardon my language. Are we allowed to swear?
Yeah, of course you can.
Cool. He was talking about Italy, and then he's talking about Spain. The agent is talking about Spain as well. He's had offers from Spain, and it's like, well, it's basically, if it's not Italy, I'll go to Spain. And I guarantee you there might be something else if this continues. Like, he's basically saying, get me out of here. Unless something changes, get me out of here. And I think Torreira probably isn't unhappy at Arsenal per se, but I think he's unhappy at Emery's Arsenal.
Ayaj in the chat says you can't put all Torreira's faults on Emery. Torreira hasn't had a good game in 10 months. That's not just down to Emery. And I was on someone else's channel last night, and I wanted to play devil's advocate a bit because it was getting very heavily aimed at Emery on the show. And I wanted to say that at the same time, there are still 11 players on that pitch. Emery isn't out there kicking the ball. These are players that have had success at other clubs when they've been there and success at this club. And yet I don't feel like they're putting 100% effort in, week out. They're not. It's not a situation where you don't like your boss. If I didn't like my boss at work, it doesn't mean that I suddenly down tools and stop putting in my effort to do my job. I know it's different in football, but how much can we as a fan base think that the players need to take some modicum of responsibility?
I would say that's a really fair point, if not for the fact that Emery is changing stuff week in, week out. And I genuinely don't believe the players know quite what it is that he wants. Formation changes. Double substitution, playing 3 at the back, playing back 4 for this entire season until we went to Leicester. I just think that without some measure of clarity and without some solidity in terms of, I think it's really difficult for them. And they're not the only, Torreira's not the only one struggling. And fair enough, maybe he hasn't had a good game. For the second half of last season for Arsenal in general was poor. Europa League games where he did well against Napoli, did well against Valencia. I think those were the best games of the second half of last season. The team in Premier League terms sort of hit a wall, and then towards the end, as we know, it fell off a cliff. We haven't played well once this season in the Premier League, not once. Have we controlled a game? Have we won a game convincingly? Have we, played for 90 minutes? The amount of times we go in at halftime and go, well, what the fuck did we just do for 45 minutes? So I do think, okay, you can say the players should do better, but I think a manager, and a big part of a manager's job or a head coach's job, is to create an environment in which players can thrive. And I think when you play players out of position, they can't do that. I think when you tell a player, this week we're going to play like this, so this week I want you to do this, next week I want you to do that. I've got one of the best strikers in the world. I'll play up front, or I'll play on the right, or I'll play on the left. You bring in a £72 million winger. He takes a step forward by scoring 2 majestic free kicks, and then you start leaving him out of the team. I think it all just, again, it comes back to Emery for me. And I think there's talent in this squad. That's what frustrates me the most. I think there really is some serious talent in this squad, and we're not getting the best out of them. And ultimately, he picks the team every week. He decides the tactics. I think for a guy who is held up as a kind of a master tactician, I don't know that that's true. He uses lots of tactics. I'm not sure many of them are that effective.
When we talk about how much he changes things week in, week out, as you say, to the point where it confuses some of the players, the devil's advocate is to that is that last 2 seasons ago, Arsene Wenger's coming to the end of his tenure, and for quite a few years, one of the biggest criticisms that was levelled at Arsene Wenger was his lack of variation, his lack to change things, his lack to look at the opponent and think, what is it we can do which is going to nullify their strengths and fight at their weaknesses? Now, we have gone, in my eyes, to completely the other end of the spectrum, that we are now looking at the opponent. We are now changing tactics based on the opposition week in, week out. So why hasn't it been as successful as, because a lot of people said that we're not changing things enough under Arsene Wenger. He's too loyal to certain players in the team and he keeps them in for too long. Now we have got a manager that changes things. Why hasn't it worked?
Well, I think you said it. We've gone to the other end of the spectrum. So our entire game plan, week in, week out, is about what the opposition are going to do and not what we're going to do and not what we're capable of doing. So Wenger's whole philosophy was, if my players go out and play as well as I know they can, because they've got the talent to attack, etc., they can beat anybody. So they don't really have to worry about what the opposition are going to do. Yeah, you're aware that, Chelsea has Hazard or Manchester United have got Pogba or whoever it is. You pay a little bit of attention to them. But I think with Emery, Emery is setting up for games against Sheffield United and saying, well, how is Sheffield United going to play? Let's try and negate their strengths. But he doesn't seem in any way focused on our own strengths.
Yeah.
On the talent and the ability and the potential that we have in this squad. So I think it's right on one hand to say, look, Wenger probably should have been a bit more tactically aware and maybe paid a little bit more attention to the opposition, which I think he started to do in the last couple of years. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in those last couple of years, we got the worst results we ever had under Arsene Wenger, because, that's not his strength. But it's like we've gone from boiling hot to freezing cold. And we would just like a nice warm bath. That's all we want, is a nice warm bath. Play some nice Arsenal football. Use the talent of Aubameyang and Lacazette and Pepe and Ozil and the quality players that we have in this squad. And also pay a bit of attention to the opposition. But don't make your entire focus the opposition, which is what seems to be the case with Emery.
No, I completely take on your point. Moving them forward and looking ahead. First off, small question: are we in agreement that we don't see a change in the near future happening?
Well,
it's a tough one.
What if we lose to Southampton on Saturday? What happens then?
Well, in my mind, I'm thinking that they're still so determined to try and allow this project to work that they would still persist with it. That's where my head's at.
I sort of share that fear, but I'm looking at this and I'm stepping back because my mind is made up. So I'm aware that I'm coming from this where a lot of things can be like confirmation bias. It's not confirmation bias, but I know what I think, and I know that what I think Arsenal need to do. But you have to ask, how long can they let it go on? So what if we lose to Southampton, or if we don't beat Southampton?
Yeah,
it'll be 6 wins in our last 20 games,
which is
it'll be 3 points from our last 15. There comes a point where results demand a change, and I think maybe fans will start demanding a change. And not that they aren't already, but like, if people thought that the booing of Xhaka was bad, I'm pretty sure that the Emirates Stadium, if Arsenal lose to Southampton on Saturday, will not be shy about letting the board and the manager, or the head coach. I keep calling the manager just because. It's just a force of habit. But they won't be shy in telling people how they feel. And the longer it goes on, the less chance we have of salvaging anything from this season. So, yes, I share your fear that I don't think they're planning on making a change in the very near future. I think this international break would have been the right time to do it, because you would have given somebody a couple of weeks, or at least a good week, to settle in, and or give yourself a week to think about who you're going to appoint. But like every bad result just makes the evidence mount up that we need something different.
No, we do. As we look forward, then we begin to get into the realm of hypotheticals. Now, I know it's not your job to pick who you would go for, but I think it would be silly of me not to ask the question. If inevitably, I think we can say the words now, Emery does go at some point, where would you sort of rest your hat as to who you would want to bring in?
It's a really good question. There are some cracking young coaches in Germany. Nagelsmann is the one, obviously, that people will have their eye on. I'd really like us to have a go for the Ajax guy,
Ten Hag,
because of the work that he's done there, because of the football that Ajax play. I think the footballing philosophy is very much in line with Arsenal, and I do think Mikel Arteta is still somebody who the club will give consideration to.
Would that excite you, Arteta?
You know what? When Emery was appointed, we were doing a podcast. We were doing a live podcast.
Yeah, I was listening to it.
So, we were doing a live podcast, myself and James and Amy Lawrence and Philippe Auclair. And we were all talking about Arteta to Arsenal as if it was a done deal, because that's what I had heard. That's what Amy, who was one of the best connected Arsenal journalists out there, had heard. That's what Philippe had heard. Is basically what was going to happen. Arteta was in London. He was house hunting, and at the last minute, they went with Emery, right? And I thought it, in hindsight, I was going, I can sort of see why they appointed Emery, because he's a track record. He has experience. He's won the Europa League. He was 4 years at Valencia. He was 3 years at Sevilla, 2 years at PSG. So the experience was there. But I'd sort of had my head around the idea of Arteta, even if I thought it was mental, that this guy, with no experience was going to come in. I think he's had another year and a half of working under Pep Guardiola as one of his, most trusted coaches. I suspect he's at a point now where he's kind of ready to do it. He's ready to take that step into management. So I think he could be somebody who would be a candidate. Allegri's another one, isn't he? Did I say him already? I think,
no, you didn't mention Allegri, but yeah.
I think he's out there. He's available. His track record at Juventus, of course, is stands up to a lot of scrutiny. But of course, Juventus is Juventus, and it's very much its own thing in Italy. And I'm not saying you or I could go there and win Serie A with Juventus, but I don't think it's quite as difficult a job to win the title in Italy as it is to win it in England, for example.
Yeah,
but he's another one out there. So I do think there are people out there. I think there are candidates out there who could come in. And at this point, it's a question of could any of them do worse than Emery is doing right now?
No, I think that my choice, and it came up, and the reason why you're here is because I replied to that. I tweeted you because you accidentally stumbled upon my video where I covered Marco Rosa, the the Gladbach manager, and we chatted to Tom Midler, who does the other Bundesliga podcast, and they follow Austrian Bundesliga football. And he looks a really, really exciting guy in Germany. He's 43, I believe, and he looks really, really interesting as a guy. But he does play with a diamond 4, which It's always about, when you consider who you would get, you look at the system. And one of the regular guests we have on the show, Drew, would kill me if you brought up Ten Hag, and he loves his Eredivisie football. And the issue that he takes with Ten Hag is that if you look at the Ajax coaching system and you look at the youth setup and how they breed players through, similar to what Barcelona used to do, they breed the philosophy at the youth level and then they bring it through to the first team, especially with the coaching system.
Yeah.
The issue that my friend Drew would take with Ten Hag coming in is that he would be coming into a completely new environment that isn't so. The assimilation from the youth side to the first string isn't as seamless as it is at Ajax, nowhere near.
Yeah.
So that's the criticism that be labelled at someone like him.
Yeah, I mean, look, we did have that kind of thing when Wenger was there. Like the team and the youth players, played in that same system and formation. So that when they did, or if they did make the step up to first team football, it wasn't completely alien to them. Which is why it's another one of the reasons why Emery's constant tinkering and changing of formations and systems, I don't think is that helpful, because we actually do have some really, really good young players coming through, and I think possibly it's the best generation of young English players that I've seen come through for a long time. They're not all going to make it, but we've got Joe Willock, who looks a hell of a player to me. We've got Emile Smith-Rowe, who is a real talent. Eddie Nketiah is on loan at Leeds. We've got Reece Nelson there. We've got Saka there. We have this talent at youth level that I think the club have in some ways forced on Emery. I'm not sure it would have been his choice to play those guys as much as he has, because if he still had Iwobi and Mkhitaryan, for example, he would be playing them. So maybe a coach who can come in and work with those young players and put them in a system that I think they'll find relatively easy to adapt to. Maybe it'll work. I mean, look, we're talking mid-season here. I don't think there's any way of getting him away from Ajax in mid-season anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, look, there are options. There's this, you think about a couple of weeks ago, and it was like it was this binary choice, wasn't it? It was either Emery or Mourinho. When that whole shit was going down. What's the story? Mourinho to Spurs? Is that what we're thinking?
I mean, it could be, possibly. I
imagine. A match made in heaven. Biggest fuckers in the world.
We hate most about football.
The biggest fuckers in the world, managed by the biggest fucker in the world.
I think it'd be a car crash, personally.
Oh, I hope so. But there are choices out there. There are choices, and I hope the club don't wait too long, because it's urgent now.
Yes, it is. Final question. We're at the time before I let you go, and it would be ill-judged of me if I didn't ask an Ask Our Style question to you before you left. So here's your choices. Would you rather, at the point in which we bought Lacazette and Aubameyang in that sort of 18-month period, would you swap them and bring back Olivier Giroud and Theo Walcott if it meant at the time that we signed Lacazette, instead we bought Virgil van Dijk and Fabinho?
Well, there's a lot. Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I think one of our big regrets over the last number of years is the fact that we didn't go for Van Dijk when he was at Celtic, and we were looking at him. And we decided against it. I don't know how it is that we decided against signing Van Dijk and somehow ended up signing Mustafi, where we thought 35 million for Mustafi was all right, but we weren't going to pay 12 million for Van Dijk.
Yeah.
You wonder, of course, like if you bring in someone like Van Dijk into a team that isn't set up defensively well enough, then would he be the same kind of player? But goddamn, he's such a good central defender. Sol Campbell had a similar kind of effect on our defense, didn't he, in that invincible season when he came in, and the double season. So it's tough. I mean, I think there's two things that are really, really hard to find in football. One is like an elite level striker, and the other is an elite level center half. I think that you can fill the gaps around a team much more easily with players of good quality. I feel like goals tend to win. You get, this is too difficult. I don't know what the answer to this one is. I don't know.
It came
Like,
from
I'd love Aubameyang and Virgil van Dijk.
Yeah. It's basically based around the fact that we've always sort of spent our money in the wrong way, in the wrong positions. And in the chat box, I will highlight their comment when I find it. But they said that they would take the Van Dijk and Fabinho because we've always scored goals. It's always been something about our game that we have always managed to score. Archie was the one that said it. But if we sign those two, it completely transforms the other end of our game, and that's why I would go with the choice.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And maybe if you have a team with a better defense, you kind of keep players like maybe Alexis Sanchez would have stayed and signed on, and he was somebody who could score goals for us. Yeah, we've always scored goals, apart from this season where we have a negative goal difference.
Yeah, insane.
So we even have these great strikers and we still can't score goals. So yeah, go on. I'm going all in on the Van Dijk thing. Go on.
Awesome. That's going to wrap things up. I really, really appreciate you taking time out of your evening, Andrew, to come on tonight.
Not at all. Not at all. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Hope people enjoyed it. And hello to everyone in the comments.
Would you like to plug your upcoming show for, I imagine, Thursday, Friday?
I don't know what I'm doing yet because it's one of those things where I sort of get to Wednesday and go, fuck, I better try and ring somebody up and organize a guest. But look, people know where to find the site and the podcast, just arseblog.com, and we do what we do. So that's it.
Yeah, of course.
All right.
Huge thanks. Obviously, welcome back anytime. I hope to see you again in the near future.
Yeah, look, anytime you want me, I'll be happy to come back on. No problem.
And as you're saying, if you're ever stuck for a guest,
hey, look, I'm always happy to add people to the roster because it's a limited pool out there. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's hardly anyone.
Hardly any Arsenal podcasters or video guys out there. So one more will do us good for sure.
Yeah, you've got a lot of love in the chat this evening. They've really, really appreciate coming on. So,
well, thank you guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll do it again soon for sure.
For sure. I hope you've enjoyed the show, people in the chat box. If you have, please make sure you give the show a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on, so you never miss a show. We will see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.